All right. Sorry I can't be there tonight, but I want to go ahead and show you a couple demos for your teapots and then for the big pots. So I'll take you all the way through them. We're going to start with the teapots, and if you guys have reviewed the lid handout, there's a couple different types of lids that I want to show you. I've got a couple examples. The first one that I'm going to show you is essentially a sort of plain rounded rim on the top, and then the lid has a flange on it, so that keeps it in place. It doesn't just slide off. The next one I think is maybe a little bit harder to do, but then the lid is easier to make, and that's where we put a gallery, right, inside the teapot there, and then that allows us to just make a flat lid that fits into there. So we'll start with this type, right? All right. I've got, I think, about 2 pounds of clay here to start with the teapot. That should be enough to give you an average size teapot. I like to throw them on a bat because we're really concerned about the lid fitting, and picking it up, it could warp, and then you end up with an oval opening, and a round lid doesn't fit on there anymore. It's no good. All right. You can make these either based on a cylinder form or a bowl form. It really just depends on how you're imagining it. I tend to do a cylinder form because already there is a lot of stuff to worry about. Handle, spout, lid. Why add trimming into the mix? Well, maybe because that's the form that you really want. You want it to be very round. And that's just fine. All right, so I'm going to open this up just like the cylinders that we've done in the past. Go ahead and have that form in mind. Think about how wide does the bottom need to be for the rest of it. Really compress it. And then I'm going to start pulling the walls. Just like the pictures, I'm going to worry about the shape after I've got some of the height to it. One of the things that you want to watch out for is getting a really thin rim. Even with this type of lid, essentially you're making 2 pots and then banging them together later when you use them. And so if it's very thin, it's prone to chipping. So I want to compress that early on and make sure that I leave it just a little more on the rounded side. Think about how wide you want that lid to be. I don't like them to get too wide, but it can be nice to have a wider opening so that you can get in there and clean it. Think about, you still want to be able to get your hand in there, clean it later. Work on getting that clay up from that bottom corner, bringing it all the way up through that rim, and making sure not to go any thinner than something like that. All right, take that water out of the bottom, get the rim the size that I want it to be, and then I can start thinking about the shape here for this. Of course, hopefully I've already been thinking about it, but hey, who knows, right? Okay. Whatever ribs you like using. I think I want to make this one nice and round, make it seem very full, right? Think about those things from the volume project about what that shape says about the contents. So I'm going to give us a nice strong shoulder, shaping from the top down to the bottom now, just to work it into this curve. Okay. And then remember to, as you're working with it, step back and take a look at the form from further away, you get a weird view of it looking straight down. In fact, it's kind of nice to see myself in the camera because I can see the pot from further away and get a better idea. I used to, and I should probably go back to doing it, throw with a mirror so I could watch the pot in the mirror. Maybe set, just up here or on the wall if you're next to a wall. All right, so I want to make sure this looks nice and clean at the top. Still have a nice well-defined rim. Just a little line there can really go a long way. Just using the corner of the rib to create that. All right. Quit messing with it now. Clean this rim up a little bit. And take that extra clay off the bottom. So when you're making a pot with a lid, you want to make the pot and then the lid, right? Don't make a bunch of pots and then a bunch of lids because you need to get the measurement when this thing is wet, when it's right on the wheel, because as it dries, it shrinks. So if you take a measurement of a leather hard pot and then make a wet lid, it's not going to fit when it shrinks. Oh, it'd be terrible, right? It might even be a good idea to write down the measurement in your sketchbook, which you bring to class, every class meeting, right? And then that way, if you need to remake the lid, you could. All right, to measure the lid, you could use a ruler, but it's kind of a pain. These calipers are nice for that. They work really well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the inside of the rim. For some reason, I like to do it when it's spinning, but I think that's probably a terrible idea. It's just a good way to destroy the pot. So I'm going to make sure that the points of that are just on the inside there. And let me get a little closer look for you. Oh boy, I hope you don't get motion sick. Let's see. All right, so you can see, hopefully, where that measurement is, right? Okay, so that measurement is going to be essentially this measurement in here to those points, so that when this sits down in there, right, this flange sits inside that, then you're going to need this to sort of go over the rim, right, so it catches it and doesn't just fall straight in. For this width, there you just eyeball it. You could measure it, but I think that just makes life harder. All right. Double check my measurement, and then tighten these things down, right? Check it again. You want to be careful not to bang them around and change your measurement while you're working, because then none of your lids will fit, and you'll have a bad time. All right, run that wire under it, and I can just move this to the side. I like to keep this where I can see it, right, so that I can keep the form in mind as I'm working. So I'm going to put it right over here. Maybe you guys can still kind of see it. And grab another bag. Remember, if it's curved, I usually want that curve to go up, otherwise it rattles around. Make sure it fits nice and snug. Gonna get that damp. And for the lid, it's just another pot. You're essentially making a bowl with a funny rim. You will have to trim this type of lid later, but the benefit is that you are then making those precise kind of measurements and adjustments on the smaller pot. So for this type of lid, somewhere in here, I have 3/4 of a pound of clay. Probably a little more than I need, but I'd always like to have a little extra rather than being short on clay. All right. Maybe I should put that in the middle. There we go. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get this centered. Low and wide, because it's a low, wide bowl. As you're making these things, it's really tempting to think about it as a bowl and be really deep. Though typically that looks strange, because then you have this weird bubble of space coming up out of your pot. It looks like the dome on the Capitol building or something like that. So if you're going for that, great. Otherwise, think very, very shallow bowl. All right, I've got my calipers over here, and I'm just going to go ahead and start by checking. All right, and I've got it centered just a little bit, just a hair wider than the calipers, so I know I'm about the right spot. I'm going to come in here and open it up like a very shallow bowl, right? So going from the middle up out towards the edge. Really compressing. All right. And I'm going to keep referring to this measurement. Essentially what I need to do here is create two rims. One rim is going to be that flange. It sort of stands up and it's going to sit down into the pot, right? And the other is going to go out and catch the rim of that pot. So I'm going to split this. Essentially, I'm just using my finger, kind of the edge of it, to just kind of push down on that outside. Give you a little close-up as to what we're working with. All right, you can see now how that's split. Boy, I'm not too good at camera. In case you didn't know, I hate being on camera. I'm doing this just for you. You're welcome. All right, so I'm gonna make this flange, thin it out a little bit. You don't wanna make it too crazy tall. It just needs enough to sit in there and hold it securely. I remember making teapots in undergrad, and I thought, oh man, I can make this really tall, and it'll be like a cup. So you take the lid out, and you can use it as a cup. What an awesome idea, right? Except with a really tall flange, all that air trapped in there, as you put it in the pot, it displaces all the tea, and it shoots out the spout. So, total failure. All right, slow this down a little, and if I can remember where I keep putting things, that would be great. Calipers. So the measurement I'm gonna take is from this corner. That's where I want it to match. I've angled this in slightly, that flange, so that it finds its center nicely. If it angles the other way, all of a sudden it's like really tight to fit it in, and then it's loose. This way it's easy to fit it in, and then it gets tighter and fits more snug as you get it in there. Then out here, you need to think about this rim and what it's gonna do, right? If it's sort of flat, it's gonna look like it's sticking straight out from the pot, right? It's kind of nice if it matches the form and curves down around it. So I'm gonna come down here, pick up under it a little bit, and give this a little bit of curve, so that when I trim it, I'll have sort of a curve matching, continuing that curve of the pot. Clean this up so I have a nice edge. Make sure I've got this angled in. I feel like this is just a little taller than I need, so take a little off. Always better to have more than you need, and take a little down. All right, round that edge off. Again, you don't want any thin edges in here because you're taking two pots and putting them together. Some people might not be as careful as you, right? Like, you might say like, oh, my grandma drinks tea and she loves tea, right? But maybe grandma's a little bit shaky, so if they're thin, you don't want her breaking it and drinking chips of ceramic, right? All right, I'll double check my measurement before I finish. Clean this up just a little bit. I like to have some nice clean definition to everything on there. So I've got a good spot to measure from. Yeah, gonna come out just a hair. You really want to take your time and be precise here in this part. If you're not, you're gonna have an ill-fitting lid. No one likes an ill-fitting lid. Not the good kind of ill, like the Lil Wayne, right? All right, so now that this is done, I can just run my wire under it. A lot of times I'll actually take these and put them on the bat with the pot that they go with, if they fit. We'll see if this one fits. So I can float it off. These little things tend to be really sturdy as long as you haven't thrown it stupid thin, in which case you just want to make another one anyway. And I can just come around here and hopefully slide it off without mucking the whole thing up. Okay. Great, so I want these two things to dry at the same rate, right? If one is drier than the other, then you end up with one shrinking more and you don't get a good idea of the actual fit. All right. Set that aside, and I'm going to go ahead and do the next type of pot just to show you that. We'll go a little more quickly. It's amazing because now I can look and see how much time I am actually taking with the demo. And what? I guess I like to hear myself talk, huh? All right, so I've got 3 pounds here. Throw it down on there. So we're making this type of lid, right? I'm gonna make a flange on the inside of the rim. I'll show you how to do that, and then we'll make a lid for this. Now this type of lid does need a handle because you can't reach down and get it out otherwise. So we can make that as part of the lid when we get to that. Quick aside, it does have a little handle on it, but it doesn't need it. Val Cushing, hopefully you read that, right? Can you tell me what the rule is? Anyone? Right, 5 inches or less, your hand can span it, right? And you don't need a handle for it. Okay, back to work. So 3 pounds of clay. Again, I'm gonna do this one as a cylinder to make my life a little bit easier, but you don't have to. You know, for example, this teapot, I believe, you can see I've got it very round, right? So I did trim a foot on it just to give it that sense of roundness. It's very curved in the bottom. I probably can't really see that, but hey, the teapot's in the classroom. Check it out, right? And there are a lot of teapots up behind the wheels on the wall. Take them down, take a look at them. Try not to break the lids though, but that can give you a better idea of how these things should work and look. All right, once I've got that centered, again, just gonna open it up. I think I wanna make a taller teapot, maybe more akin to like a coffee kind of pot. And that's fine if you wanna make a coffee pot, right? Because of course they work for same thing. I think the difference between a teapot and a coffee pot traditionally is just the shape. Coffee pots tend to be taller than they are wide, the serving vessels, whereas teapots tend to be a little wider than they are tall, often rounder. But that's a rule of thumb, not a hard and fast rule. All right. Get this bottom set to where I want it, compress it, and then I'm gonna go ahead and make my first pull or two, leaving clay a little bit up at the rim. Before you get beyond that first or second pull, you need to go ahead and split the rim. If you try and do it later, you can't press on the pot without just destroying the walls. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make that first pull, making sure I leave enough clay up here now to come in and split this. So I want to get the general shape. As I'm throwing, I probably will mess it up a little bit, but that's all right. I can clean it up later. If you go ahead and get that shape now, you'll be in good shape. I feel like I keep saying the word shape. Oh well. All right, so all I'm doing is kind of using my fingernail to split this rim and my left hand to support. I will try and show you a little more up close here. So, essentially, you can see I'm using that finger, right, to just divide the rim in two. Hopefully that helps. I can't really see what I'm doing when I've got that. All right. Yeah, back in business, hopefully. So again, don't let these get thin, right? You want a nice rounded edge to them. Now that I've got that split, I can come back and continue pulling. I just want to stop when I get to sort of underneath that rim. If you just fold it back together, you've undone all your work. So I'm gonna really get down in there. And bring this clay up through the rim. All right, so I'm just sort of supporting that as I get to the top, keeping it from losing its shape. And then I can come back and continue to pull. Really working on getting that clay up out of the bottom. All right, use all those cool skills you learned on throwing bigger for your teapots so you can make something nice and tall. I think I got one more in here. Okay, so I've got that where I want it. Height-wise, I'll refine the shape a little bit. I think I'm going to stick with something close to this and just give it a nice sort of smooth, hopefully continuous concave curve. Yeah, that'll do. All right. So then I'm going to come in here and just refine this rim, clean it up a little bit. One of the goals here is that I want this flange, and I'll show you on the fired pot. I want the flange, this part here, to angle down slightly, right? So it's angled like this, so that the lid naturally finds the lowest point. There's going to be some amount of give, right? And if it goes the other way, it's going to just slip over it. Again, then with this part that goes up, I want it angled out ever so slightly so that the lid sort of fits tighter as it goes down. So I'm just going to make those small adjustments. Again, trying to avoid making any really thin parts to the rim or that kind of stuff. And then I'm going to take my measurement, right? The measurement that I'm going to take is from this corner, right? So I'll essentially, on this one, show you, I'll be measuring corner to corner, right? So really, this measurement, that corner right there, to across it there. So okay. Great. And, stop the wheel, right? Do what I say, not what I do. All right, clean up the bottom. All right, the less work you can give yourself later, the better chance you have of this thing looking nice. I will clean off my bat and run the wire under it, then I can take the bat off and make the lid. Okay, how we doing? All right, so I'll keep that where I can see it. You can't really see it, but that's all right. Okay. Get my bat damp. Now for this lid, I don't need as much clay because I'm not having to split the rim on this one. So I'm just going to use half a pound. And remember, make the pot, then make the lid. Then make the pot, make the lid. All right. Sometimes it can be a little trickier centering small pieces of clay. You may need to use your fingers rather than your whole hand, right? So I'm just sort of using my fingers. But sort of whatever works for you. Now, I'm gonna just center this essentially low and wide, but I wanna leave clay in the middle that'll be the handle. So I'm gonna just kind of continue pushing down. I want sort of a point of reference here. How far do I need to go? All right, and I'm leaving that chunk of clay there. In the middle. All right, so I need to come out just a little wider. Again, you don't want to make this thing too thin. It'll be prone to warping. It'll be really hard to get it to keep its shape. These things could sink in, they could rise up a little bit. Whatever floats your boat here, whatever you feel like fits the design of your piece. All right, I've got just a hair more to come out. That looks just about right. So I'm going to clean it up just a little. I tend to like them to be just a bit big so that I can kind of trim them down to fit exactly here on the wheel. Now you can potentially trim a lid to fit when it's leather hard, but it's very hard to judge just how leather hard it is compared to your piece. And if one is off from the other, then you'll trim them and they won't fit once they dry. Wouldn't that be disappointing? All right, double check that measurement. Yeah, I like it. And now I can do something in the middle here to make a handle for it because it needs one. I can just throw whatever. Remember, a good handle gets larger at the top so that you can grip it. If it gets narrower, your fingers just slip off of it. So you can kind of do whatever. Sometimes it can be fun to throw a little hollow form on here. So that's what I'm gonna do. All right, just throw like a tiny pot. All right, I could leave it like that, but you can also come in and continue to thin this out. you want, you can even like choke the whole thing in together, like to the point of where it actually meets, and have like a big fat handle, but it's light because it's hollow. So I just keep choking it in. As you choke it in, it gets thicker, so you can come back and thin it a little bit. Before you close it up, go ahead and take that water out of there. Otherwise, it's gonna be really prone to cracking in the bottom. All right, enough messing around, and I'm just gonna bring it together and choke it until the whole thing closes up. If it gets a little funky, I'm not going to worry about it, because once it's closed, I can sort of play around with the shape a little bit, because that air inside is going to give me something that kind of pushes from the inside for me. Of course, if you overdo it, you'll sort of pop it like a balloon. Don't ruin the birthday party. All right, enough messing around. Oh, not quite enough, right? So I'm gonna stick with that. Clean it up a little bit. Now later on, when this is leather hard, I'll put a hole up through the bottom of the lid so that the air can escape. Otherwise, this will want to crack because it's shrinking and compressing that air. And then when I fire it too, the air expands as it heats. It could blow it up. So you do want to keep that in mind. Give myself a nice little line there to define it. Again, before I'm done, double check my measurement. I still like it. And this one I am going to leave on the bat. Because these flat ones warp so easily, so I want it to get leather hard. So I'm just going to run the wire tool under it and take it off. All right, the last thing I want to show you is sort of preparation for finishing these, and it's how to throw a spout while I'm here on the wheel. Typically with spouts, I will do them the same day I'm going to use them, just like handles. So whenever I'm doing the handle, I usually do the handle first and then the spout. So I'll throw the spouts, then do the handles, and then attach the spouts. You want them to be wet enough that they're still flexible and you can make adjustments easily. Get these out of my way. And I'm back. With spouts, I'll typically make a few extras because they're pretty quick to throw and easy to mess up in the construction. I like to throw them off the hump because it takes such a small amount of clay that it really, I think, is more work to center than it would be just to take a big ball and center the top of it. Okay. I've got 2 pounds of clay, but with throwing off the hump, it really doesn't matter. I think you could easily make a nice spout out of about 3/4 of a pound of clay, maybe less. Always good to have a little extra. So essentially with the spout, I'm making a pot that is shaped a wide base that narrows to a small opening. So it's like a little bottleneck. I'll also show you next class how to hand build a spout for those taller sort of S-curve spouts. This is going to be a shorter one, more traditional. All right, so I'm going to open this thing up. I'm not worried about compressing the bottom or anything because the bottom's not going to be part of it. If I left it in there, the teapot wouldn't pour. So I've got this open and the inside maybe 2.5, 3 inches. And then from here, I'm just going to start pulling, and I'm really working on getting in towards the center, right? Lots of pressure from the outside. Really want this thing to close up. Again, I'm not worried about water sitting in the bottom. Come back down here, get some more of that clay up into it. And bring it up. The whole goal of a spout is to create some pressure so it pours nicely. So a bigger opening that narrows down is then going to give you good pressure so the thing pours with a little bit of force, like a nice stream to it. You don't want a trickle or anything like that. So I'm going to choke this in. And as I choke it in, remember it'll thicken up a little bit so I can come back and thin it. Now as far as the width of the opening goes, you don't want to make it too narrow. It is going to get smaller as it shrinks, right? And if it gets too narrow, it can easily get clogged with glaze or just take forever to fill up a teacup. Nobody wants that. So that's about as narrow as I would get it. Now, in order to keep thinning it though, I need some way to reach in there. And fortunately, I have a specialized tool, right? You thought, oh, this was the only useful end of a paintbrush. Not at all. I'm gonna come in here. I like these more than a needle tool because stab yourself with a needle tool, that's no fun. And then I can use this on the inside to give me a little bit of pressure so I can keep thinning it. Now I don't want to make this as thin as the brush. That would be far, far too thin, too small an opening. So I don't want to choke it around that brush. I just want to use it on the inside as something to push against. All right, a couple other things to watch out for with spouts. If they get wider at the end, sometimes people like ones that then flare out. They don't pour nicely. They kind of like bleh, 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 vomit tea, which is not appetizing. So I'm gonna leave it as the sort of end of it being the narrowest point. I wanna round it off a little bit. You know, having a sharper edge on here is gonna help this thing cut the liquid and pour without dripping. But a really sharp edge is also very prone to cracking. So, you know, just like with your spouts on the pitchers. You think about what texture you want this to have in terms of matching your pot. All right, and the last thing I'm going to do is a spout that just sticks out straight, right? That it looks weird. It's very stiff. You know, when you think of the little Teapot song, right? You guys know the song, I'm a little teapot, right? The motions, you're not doing this, right? You're doing like this. It needs to have some kind of curve to it. So, no problem. I can just take it right now and just give it a little bit of a curve, right? So this is what we're looking at, right? This is kind of what I've got. You can see sort of size-wise for the opening, you know, maybe about a little smaller than my pinky, something like that. Then I'm gonna cut this thing off. I do like to keep the bottom as part of it for now, because it helps move it around without messing it up. Later that'll get taken out. So for the moment, I'm just gonna take this, hold that wire tool steady, run it under there, and then I can take this thing off of here, hopefully, yeah, right? And I'll set that aside on a board so it can start to dry. So, we'll use this later once everything's leather hard, and I'll show you how to assemble a teapot. But, oh my gosh, 40 minutes. Hopefully you haven't all left and lost your patience. Next I'll show you some demos for making the big pots. I don't know, however you want to break this up. Don't have to watch both demos. You may want to get to work. All right, see you soon.